I want to note before I go through what the president is saying that we, the press corps here at the White House, have not had the chance to actually question the president in over 2 weeks. He has not taken questions from us. He didn't yesterday. They didn't even hold a press conference with the Mexican president, which is typically what they do in a foreign leader visits. But he is tweeting, and he's tweeting a lot. And he just fired off a huge threat. And basically, to sum it up, he is complaining that people are going after him in his view, but not going after his political opponents. This is something he's complained about for a long time now with the FBI, with the Senate Judiciary Committee, which is obviously Republican controlled. And that is what he's saying now. He's saying, you know, he's accusing Barack Obama and Joe Biden of crimes. He's saying that no Republican Senate Judiciary response, no justice, no FBI, no nothing. So basically, he is complaining because he feels like he is being unfairly targeted, something that, of course, has been a theme of his entire administration. But then he goes on and says this is prosecutorial misconduct. He says, we catch the other side spying on my campaign, the biggest political crime in history, and nothing happens. And then he talks about his achievements so far in office. So clearly the president is not happy with this, even though you heard how Jeffrey is framing this as a win for the president because it's unlikely that anyone's actually going to see his financial record.
The moment the Supreme Court released its latest ruling, Washington felt like it shifted on its axis. Even in a city built on tension, power struggles, and non-stop political theater, this decision cracked through the noise with a force no one was prepared for. It wasn't just another legal opinion. It wasn't just another chapter in a long-running feud between branches of government. It was a ruling that instantly sent shockwaves through Congress, rattled the White House, and left millions of Americans glued to their screens wondering what would happen next. In a presidency defined by conflict and confrontation, Donald Trump now faces a moment unlike anything before it. And the silence from the Oval Office, a silence that has stretched for days, is already being interpreted as a sign that the situation behind closed doors might be far more intense than anyone expected. For over 2 weeks, Trump had refused to take questions from reporters stationed just a few steps away from the West Wing. He skipped press conferences. He ignored shouted questions. He left journalists guessing while his administration continued to face growing scrutiny over financial transparency battles that had been simmering for years. But instead of addressing the nation directly, Trump unleashed a rapid-fire series of tweets criticizing the investigations, the court decisions, and what he described as a one-sided campaign against him. It was a familiar tone: frustration, urgency, and defiance. But this time, it landed differently. The legal walls weren't just inching closer. They were moving fast, faster than even his most loyal supporters expected. And nothing captured that shift more clearly than the Supreme Court's narrow 5-4 vote rejecting Trump's last attempt to keep his financial documents fully shielded from Congress. What makes this ruling so critical isn't just the outcome, it's the legal reasoning behind it. The court didn't issue a sweeping condemnation or a dramatic blow to executive authority. Instead, it delivered something far more precise and lasting: a clarification of the limits of presidential privacy, especially when Congress seeks information connected to oversight responsibilities. Several justices emphasized that while presidents do hold certain privileges, those privileges are not absolute and cannot override every attempt at legislative scrutiny. The ruling referenced earlier decisions about tax returns and financial disclosures, reinforcing the core principle that holding office does not place a person beyond accountability. Even Trump's own appointees did not align with him entirely, underscoring a reality he has pushed against repeatedly. No matter who sits on the bench, the judicial branch does not operate as an extension of the presidency. The most striking part is how this decision opens the door for Congress to reassess financial documents that had been tied up in years of legal battles. These are not explosive revelations or secret findings. They are simply the kinds of materials lawmakers often review when examining financial practices, ethics guidelines, or the structure of presidential disclosures. Loan histories, compliance memos, routine banking paperwork that, under normal circumstances, wouldn't interest the average person at all. Yet in this context, public curiosity is intense. The combination of political drama, uncertainty, and media coverage has created a national spotlight on information that would otherwise remain quietly archived in committee rooms. Inside those rooms, lawmakers are already gearing up for some of the most closely watched oversight hearings in recent history. Far from making accusations, members of Congress say they want clarity. They want to understand how major banks interact with high-profile clients, how risk assessments are performed, and whether reforms might be needed to standardize financial transparency rules for elected officials. These are not partisan talking points. They're foundational governance questions, the type that rarely trend online but suddenly matter because of the national conversation surrounding Trump. And as these hearings unfold, the political implications are growing more complicated by the hour. You can feel the tension within Congress itself. The ruling doesn't name Trump, but everyone knows he is at the center of the storm. Some of his allies have urged patience, calling the situation routine, overstated, or purely procedural. Others seem increasingly cautious, aware that public opinion has shifted dramatically in recent months. Trump's approval ratings, always a barometer of the national mood, have dipped to levels that even seasoned analysts are calling historically low for a sitting president. While approval numbers fluctuate constantly, this downward trend has accelerated since the court decision, creating a ripple effect through the Republican caucus. Senators facing tight re-election races are suddenly far more hesitant to align themselves with Trump's public statements, worried that doing so may put them out of step with the constituencies they need to survive politically. At the same time, legal scholars, constitutional experts, and former Justice Department officials are filling television panels with explanations about what this ruling means for the future. They describe a presidency at an inflection point, where institutional pushback is no longer theoretical. The American system is built on checks and balances, and whenever one branch pushes too far, another snaps back to restore equilibrium. In their view, this moment isn't just about Trump, it's about the presidency itself, what it can do, what it must disclose, and how it must operate under the rule of law. And that analysis has touched off a wave of public reaction unlike anything seen since the early pandemic or the most turbulent moments of the 2020 election. The protest began almost immediately after the ruling was announced. Crowds formed outside government buildings in Washington, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and dozens of other cities, some organized by advocacy groups and others entirely organic. People gathered for different reasons, some calling for transparency, some defending Trump, others demanding congressional reform, but all responding to a moment that feels larger than life. The streets around Capitol Hill became so crowded that police erected temporary barriers to prevent pedestrian overflow. Drone footage showed massive streams of people moving through the city, chanting, waving signs, or simply walking quietly with their phones recording everything. It was a reminder that, in the modern age, political moments aren't confined to official buildings. They play out in real time across social media, news broadcasts, and digital communities worldwide. Financial markets reacted just as quickly. Investors hate uncertainty, and Washington is serving them a double dose. Overnight futures swung wildly. Analysts attributed the movement not to any specific document or allegation, but to the perception of instability. Whenever there's a legal ruling involving a sitting president, global markets instinctively pull back, adopting a wait-and-see posture. This time was no different. Major indexes dipped sharply before stabilizing hours later, creating a jittery environment for traders who thrive on predictability. Economists warned that if political tensions continued to escalate, the volatility could last far longer than anyone hopes. Meanwhile, inside the White House, the silence has grown more noticeable. Trump is known for his rapid responses, off-the-cuff remarks, and willingness to speak directly to the public, even in moments of crisis. But as the hours pass without a clear statement, analysts are beginning to wonder whether the administration is weighing its next move carefully behind the scenes. Advisors may be drafting talking points, preparing legal responses, or coordinating with congressional allies, or they might simply be absorbing the ruling and assessing its long-term implications. Either way, the lack of communication is fueling widespread speculation about what comes next. This is where the political world becomes almost gravitational. Every action, every word, every delayed comment becomes part of a larger narrative, one that no single person controls. Members of Trump's own party are now facing intense questions from the press about whether they still support him, whether they agree with the ruling, and what this moment means for the party's future. Some are doubling down, emphasizing unity and decrying what they call excessive scrutiny. Others are noticeably cautious, using phrases like, need to review the decision, waiting for more information, or focused on the legislative agenda. These subtle differences matter. They reveal the early signs of a political recalibration unfolding in real time. Across the country, millions of Americans are watching with a mix of confusion, frustration, and anticipation. They've seen political storms before, but something about this one feels different. It feels heavier. It feels final. It feels like a turning point in a presidency that has continually tested the limits of political endurance. And whether you support Trump, oppose him, or fall somewhere in between, it's impossible to deny that this ruling has reshaped the landscape in ways that will influence American politics for years to come. As night falls over Washington, attention shifts to what tomorrow may bring. Will Trump address the nation? Will Congress escalate its oversight efforts? Will the financial markets steady or plunge again? Will public protests fade or grow stronger? No one knows. And that uncertainty is exactly what makes this moment so captivating. It's a rare point in history where the country seems to be collectively holding its breath, waiting for the next chapter to reveal itself. But one thing is clear. The Supreme Court's decision has drawn a bright line in the sand, one that future presidents will have to navigate carefully. It affirms that transparency and oversight are not optional. They're essential to the functioning of the American system. Courts may interpret the law, Congress may demand information, presidents may assert privilege, but ultimately the balance must hold. And today, that balance shifted decisively. As America watches and waits, the story is far from over. But for now, this chapter stands as one of the most consequential turning points of the Trump presidency, a moment that has pushed Washington into a level of turmoil few could have predicted. If you found this deep dive helpful, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and share your thoughts in the comments. There's a lot more unfolding, and we'll be here to break down every major development as it happens. Stay tuned, because the next chapter is already beginning.